All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samuel?
Well, it is the weekend, so it is Memory of Light. We are finishing the last book, and it's the weekend, so I can actually have some white lightning because no weekdays for me now. If you noticed, I was a little lethargic on Wednesday. That's unfortunately that sober me, but we'll do the best we can. Weekends are fun.
Yeah, this will be extra fun because of what we're trying to get through here. I have thoughts, but first we've got some comments. So,
Yes.
do we want to
Let, let's
open this can of
let's
worms?
yeah, let's go ahead and get canceled right off the bat. Our good Russian friend Isomorphic says at 10:32, and I'm assuming this is when I was talking about that
Hmm.
thread with all the women saying it would be just pure bliss without men. 10:32, if men cease to exist, women will use the masculine women to do the violence. Absolutely. I had a bi girlfriend once, good for you. The lesbian relationship dynamics is congruent to traditional one. In 90% of cases, one of them looks and acts like the man with a short haircut, abrasive and aggressive way they carry themselves, the way they dress like a Russian gopnik. You're going to have to explain what a Russian gopnik is, unless Heath knows. While the other is all girly. These gender roles are universal law. And yes. So we've had many episodes on the evolution of desire and the differences between male and female mate choices, selection, and preferences. But also, this spurred me to look up the actual data on violence, and it tickled a memory of some things that I had heard, so I had to look it up. And this is in accordance to the what's the source here? Domestic violence something lawyers project or whatever. So they're citing some research here. Uh, Around 44% of lesbian and 61% of bisexual women have experienced forms of rape and physical violence by an intimate partner. And this is as compared to 35% of straight women, 26% of gay men, and 37% of bisexual men. So lesbian relationships actually have the highest domestic violence rate of any kind of relationship.
Hmm.
So if anybody thinks that just because men disappear, there's going to be no violence, no, just the masculine women are going to take over. I mean, 95% of female CEOs were college athletes. That's because they have that other thing that helps them in a competitive world, which the thing that helps you in a competitive world also leads you to be a little bit more physically forceful when the time is arises, even if it's not justified. So, so yeah, it's just gonna be just gonna look different, is all it is. In fact, when we look at the work of Richard Wrangham, males were domesticated not by females. Males were domesticated by other males, coalitions of other males, because the alpha would come in and beat everybody up. But then it didn't take long for a social animal such as human beings to say, hey, you know what? Three of us can beat that one guy up, even though not a single one of us can. And so we were actually domesticated not by females. We were domesticated by other males of our own species. So the same thing's going to happen to women, except in reverse. The alphas are going to come forward and be like, you're not adapted for this, and all these coalitions of males aren't around anymore, so we're going to take
This is
power.
I've I didn't realize, but I purposely when I talk about men make civilization, women create it. That's why I use the word civilization, because what you're talking about is domesticating. What I'm talking about is women giving men purpose and goal and drive beyond our base
Yeah, I
nature.
used the word domesticating
Hmm.
because that's Wrangham's language, so I wanted to stick with his literature. But yeah,
Yeah,
civilized male, the civilized male,
but
the pro-social male.
there's the reverse is also true, and I've talked about this, bringing up, Haidt's work and Peterson's work, talking about the
By the way,
differences
Haidt's
in
latest book, The Anxious
minds.
Generation, is
Yeah,
amazing. I'm halfway through it. It is so good.
but they've very eloquently and forcefully made the point that you can think your side is right and the other side is wrong, but you'd better recognize that you need both sides. You need people who think both ways. A silly example of like the inverse of what you're talking about is, yeah, men need women to keep us from being the male lion that just wants to eat and screw and fight all the time. That helps us, give us direction and purpose, but women need men or they'd never know where to go for dinner. And it's silly, and it's a basic hackneyed joke, but it exists for a reason, because no, that stereotype is stereotypical. And yeah, it's at some point someone needs to make the decision. At some point someone needs to say, let's do this.
Well, and this is why I bring up the other men, because when it comes to sexual dimorphism, which is the difference between men and women, size and all of that, we're like middle of the road. You look at the great apes, the difference between a male ape and a female ape in these tribes is massive. It's like Shaq to Hawk to a girl. If anybody's seen that picture, they're or Shaq to Simone Biles, that's the way the great apes are. We're kind of middle of the road. We're not like certain bird species where it's pretty much the same, but we're also not like the great apes where there's this massive difference. If it was left up to just females controlling male sexuality, we would be more like the great apes. In fact, the way they do things, I'm not talking about chimpanzee groups, so no one try to fact check me on this with chimpanzees and bonobos. I'm talking about the big guys, the silverbacks and everything. They actually, when they go find their women, sometimes it's willing and sometimes it's not. And the big alpha males actually look for women that fight back harder, because when they forcefully copulate with those women, they know they're going to have a strong baby, because you have strong daddy and strong mama. So the harder the female fights back, the more they like it. Whereas humans, we're a lot more social than that, but we've socialized ourselves because the other males said, no, this is not the way, because we also want to copulate. And we will gang up on you to make sure that we can get our piece as well. That's how the Taliban was formed, but that's okay. That's another side project there.
It's
But
almost
yeah,
like
so
people are people. They just, do the
yeah,
same thing slightly differently.
so you want to say, oh, men are the responsible for all the violence in the world? It's like 90% of violent crime, yeah. Our jails are full, 90% male. But how much of that crime was instigated by a woman? How many of those violent acts were on behalf or out of jealousy or all of these other things that involve female? We would probably be more like orangutans if it wasn't for the social aspect of our being. We would just be wandering the woods till we find a girl, copulate, and then go wander the woods again. That's probably how we would be, but we can't be that way because we have big brains and babies take long times to develop. So we developed over time a more cultural, civilized, I hate to use the word civilized, but yeah, I guess it's the correct word. Civilized version of all of those other things, but it wasn't because women are peaceful. It was because men figured out how to get theirs too, even though they didn't have the genetic lottery. And that's a completely different story. So, but back to the point of, yeah, women will just get violent anyways. Look at lesbian relationships. That's all you need go no further. And we
Hmm.
spent way too much time on that comment, but
Yeah,
it
well,
was fun. It was funny. It kind of it made me laugh
um,
going into this whole
well,
thing.
this one makes me laugh too, and it's he's got a good point, because I also this whole storyline annoyed me, but all of Elaine's stuff there towards the end annoyed me. The whole subplot with Elaine's pregnancy and Malar being the father annoyed me because of how much inertia there is with such things, and that's a major, point that um
Well, I
Morgase,
think,
Elaine, Tom, they all make that point about rumor at various
mhm.
points in the that rumor
Yeah,
is powerful.
and that subplot was a bomb, not because it existed, it's because they actually didn't go far enough with it.
Yeah, it really fizzled out, and it the subplot kind of fizzled out. But to Ideal's point, the the idea wouldn't have fizzled out. That's still going on in the background. So um it's one of those moments where book magic steps in and you have to suspend your disbelief. Bashir is right that the men might fight more bravely once they know they fight for the Dragon Reborn's heir, but most of them would still think that Rand got cucked by a guard for years and years to come. Fight for the cuckold reborn bravely. No thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Eh. It works with Perrin
Because nobody got
because,
pregnant.
well, partly that, but then also, you know, um, Jordan at the end, and then Sanderson does a decent job of explaining how they went out of their way to, and not only did they go out of their way, but they had a setup that made it easier to squash those rumors because, as I don't remember if it's Fail or Bearlane's point of view that who's talking about if you actually talk to the Two Rivers guys, especially because they know better, but people are still people and an juicy gossip. But if you actually try and pin them down, did this really happen? Do you really believe this? Well, okay, I guess it is kind of not likely. So that I'd never even thought of the parallel there between that storyline and the Millar storyline until now, but yeah, that makes the Millar storyline just kind of going nowhere even more egregious because Jordan took the time to point out how serious even a rumor like that could be to someone in a position of authority with Perrin's storyline. And then with Elaine and Rand's storyline, it's just boop, it's gone.
Yeah. Well, and even to not even get that thought in Morgase's head when she finds out Elaine is pregnant,
Mm,
because she was one of the harshest on Perrin when the whole Barrelane rumor was going around. So
mm,
yeah. Uh Seven greatest words, yeah, because it was basically a nothing burger as far as what he
mm.
what he did. The seven greatest words Sanderson ever wrote in the series, had this dark brooding desire to finally get the hot, steamy foursome that was destined to happen ever since it was established that Min, Avienda, Elaine were in this for the long run. Oh, I don't even think Jordan was that brave. I think he was like, I've done enough. I've stirred enough controversy in this relationship. But instead of giving me that, Sanderson delivers a foursome of another kind between Rand, Elaine, and his two unborn children. As as if we lacked reasons to rag on Sanderson's writing before. Yes, Elaine is very, very far along. Uh, her breastises are probably extremely swollen, which Rand probably liked, but they also might have been leaking at this point.
I don't think
And
she's that far along, but yeah, she's definitely
yeah,
showing.
he might
They
have
they
been
make a
knocking heads
point
with his
that
own kid. So considering, there's a chance that he'll never see his children, he gave them their first spanking, I guess. Uh,
we
you
move
know,
on now.
I I have a friend who's got a fetish. He's obsessed with pregnant women, and I'm like, what does that
I
say
don't
about you,
understand
dude?
that. I
What is
really
that?
don't.
Pregnant boobs are awesome when they look like that. That's great, but the belly that and the fact that there's a baby in there and you might actually what did I actually hit the baby? I don't know. Oh, that would be disturbing. Yes.
Yep, that's weird.
Yeah, that's weird. So just let her have the baby and then you still have the pregnant boobs and no babies. There you go. But but yeah, thank you for bringing that mental image
Yep,
into this
yep,
world.
yeah. Thanks for that. Um, we addressed the other comment on our social episode when we talked about Russia and Ukraine
Yes,
for quite a
yes, we did.
while,
Yeah.
and so now we've got Scott chiming in with the Hansel and Gretel, um, uh, the obvious Hansel and Gretel analogy there, but just kind of taking it up a level because this is the children's version, and since this is like our world, the real world at a different point in time, but the children's version was based on something you know creepy. Did I send you that meme of uh it's like an old fashioned painting and it's a woman who's on fire and there's like a dancing cat beside her and the text is my life is a fairy tale written by a German author.
Yes. That is the way. But you know, we were just talking about this in one of my fitness groups the other day because it's high school kids, college kids, and their parents all at one. And we were talking the youngest, the son, he doesn't read. And he was like, "What the hell's Aesop's Fables?" When I brought up that we should actually do literary review on Aesop's Fables as high schoolers, not
Mm,
just read them as
mm,
children, you know? And he was like, "What is that?" And we're like, "You don't know the Aesop's Fables? They're all like lessons. You know, I don't know why she swallowed the fly, right? That could be analogous to lying because a little lie has to be covered by a bigger lie, has to be covered by a bigger lie all the way through, but
mhm,
so many different things that works for. And it's kind of you get the message as a kid, but it's really kind of lost on you and hopefully it just sticks as a this thing in the back of your head. But I think as maturing adults, it would be really good to go back and look at these things and look at the meaning of them because they were written as lessons.
mhm.
And maybe there was something lost in translation where they don't come across that way in English. But definitely for the Germans, they were disturbed a lot because if you really break it down, we all read Hansel and Gretel as like 5-year-olds, but she's trying to eat them.
Mhm.
I mean, the spider and the
Big
fly,
Bad
the
Wolf
lady
does eat
explodes.
Grandma, and the
Yeah,
yeah, the hunter cuts the stomach open to pull out Grandma. Yeah,
yeah.
it's twisted stuff. I love it. Um, uh, it always comes back, and this is going to come up again today a couple of times, Scott. It always comes back to was it Jordan or was it Sanderson? Only Maria and Harriet know. This is the tragedy of RJ's death, and it really is. Um,
Yeah, and that,
because
you know, on the surface, that almost sounds selfish as a fan. This is the tragedy of RJ's death that we don't know for real. But you know this was RJ's real baby.
it's also
And
the tragedy of his legacy. Yeah.
yeah, and he probably felt that way going. I can't imagine that at least wasn't near the top. If it was a top five thought of him on his way out the door, was probably I never finished this thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that being someone who's really proud of what I do professionally, that would be one of my top five thoughts too,
Hmm.
going out the door. Is I would think about my son, I would think about my family, and I would think about all the things that I might have done better in what I do now. And that's just, oh, that's gotta suck.
Hmm. I don't think this will come up today because we don't really get to them much, but I find it incredibly ironic that the only two real Aes Sedai, and I assume here he's referring to the servant of all, which we
Mhm.
talked about a bit of the only two real servants of all turn out to be the loner outcast Moraine and the hostile competitor Nynaeve.
Well, but let's tie this to the first comment we addressed today. What happens when you have an all-female power structure? It turns to that exact corruption. This is very well described in the Wheel of Time of exactly what happens when you end up with an all-female power structure. It is corrupted just as badly as the Black Tower is, which is very aptly described by Jordan as an all-male power structure and how it
The
would
the
devolve.
the
So
downfall was faster and more
more violent.
violent for
Yeah.
the Black Tower, but was basically the same,
Yep.
just done differently. Yeah. I am not a native Texican, but I've taken the spirit to heart. Don't mess with Texas. Yeehaw.
Yeehaw. Yep. We all need to go to Gonzalez and sit by the cannon.
Indeed. All right. Enough procrastinating. Um, chapter 11. We're going to try and get from chapter 11 to chapter 15, and it's a good chunk of,
Yeah, it's about
you
100
know,
pages in my version. So,
yeah, it's about 100 pages. Um, but the reason I wanted to try and power through is because we finally get 250 pages in to the last book, we finally get a Matt scene. And I hadn't really thought about it before. And it dawned on me when I was reading, I went, you know, in some of his interviews, Sanderson has talked about how he really wanted to get have a scene where the three boys get back together, and share a moment. And it just logistically, it couldn't work. And now, as we've been going through it, the thought occurred to me, could it not logistically work? Or was there an element of I can't write Matt, so I need to lessen the scenes the Matt
Do
scenes
do
in
we
this
want?
book.
Do we have any comments about that little blip of Egwene?
The only blip I have is that I do find it I like that moment. We get a little reprieve here before we have to get mad because I actually like the gateway, the way Brian is using the gateway in
Hmm.
midair as a view, as a drone basically. And my thought was it's so obvious that only a great captain could think of it because what makes them great is that they think outside of the box. They know the box, they are very familiar with the box, but they're able to step outside of it. Other
Yeah,
people can't.
yeah, but also this is where he brings back a character that's been minor, and we know we've complained about all these new Aes Sedai popping
Mm-hmm.
in, and we don't remember the names. But Yukiri's been around for a little bit,
Yeah.
and she's always been the little bit character that comes in and does something smart,
Mm-hmm.
and we get her coming in here and playing her role, doing something smart,
Mm-hmm.
and we get that little bit of curiosity, and we get a little insight into probably the bastard child of all the Ajas, the gray, you know.
Yeah.
Other than the dealings with the sea folk, we really don't get a whole lot of them. Uh, so this was a really good bringing back of another character to fill a role that it kind of added some continuity to some of the scenes that are to come. Because, like you said, the little drone action was
Mm-hmm.
is very important for everything that happens here, and we get a quick 2 pages which of actual Egwene good chapter. So
Yes. And the way it ends, I think, is a great example of what good writing is and why we keep griping about modern storytelling and why it's bad is because they don't know how to show that one character is good, especially if that character is of a checks particular boxes. They don't know how to show that this character is a good and competent special person without squashing someone else.
mhm,
And when Egwene complains or notes that Brian's strategy seems to be way too offensive and why can't we be more aggressive, that's perfectly within keeping of her character to suggest that, to want to be more
mhm.
proactive. But then it's not, Brian, you're a dummy, I'm taking charge here. It's, well, I had thought that, but I wasn't sure that the Aes Sedai would be willing. I do have some other plans if you'd like to see them.
Yeah,
You know,
the
i
only
i,
thing
I
I would
love
have
that
liked,
moment.
yeah, the only thing I would have liked different here is that should have been in part of the discussions with Elaine in the big tent with all of the captains, like how do
Mm-hmm.
we use most effectively the Aes Sedai? And so that should have already been addressed before this whole scene. But like to your point, the way he wrote it didn't throw anybody under the bus. So
Mm-hmm.
from a practical standpoint, this is would have been a glaring hole in the overall plan. But so you can't throw it on Brian. It actually is on Elaine that
Mm-hmm.
as a channeler herself, she wasn't like, well, how are we going to use these people? You know, and actually we don't get a whole lot of how they're using the currently loyal Asha Aman either, or the kin,
Yeah, it's
or
just kind of hinted at that the Ashaman are kind of just spread out. The loyal ones that are for sure good guys are just kind
yeah,
of
most
spread
of them
out
seem to be on the
doing
Faldara
something.
front, on the Tarwin's Gap front with
Hmm.
Narishma. But yeah, it's like, well, what about the kin? We've got hundreds of them.
I
What
I
are they're in the healing tents? They're in the healing spot. I
yeah,
know
I think
that,
it
but
was mentioned in passing that they're helping with gateways and with healing.
there's hundreds of them.
I know.
They could be in circles with one green,
I
you know. You could
I'm
have
pretty sure we find out there are about 1,000 kin,
hmm.
and that the number blows them away when they hear it. I know, but
Yeah,
I think it's somewhere around 1,000.
we get tactically later here in these chapters that circles weren't the best use because of spreading out the uses of the power, but at the same
Mhm.
time if you've got people like the kin, you could have circles of just enormous destruction.
Yeah, if
And
every
that
one
would be
of
nice in Tarwin's Gap, where they're coming through a
mhm.
funnel, and you could just be blowing the shit out of things. But
Yeah.
or fighting the
Um,
dreadlords. Hey, there's that too.
yeah, that's a big deal. All right, this Matt, I think you
Uh,
have
oh.
um
You mean my note that says quotation? Ah,
I thought that
end
was at
quote.
the end. I thought that was chapter 15. Is it both?
Several.
I think what
I have
makes
my
this
old notebook here, and there's several pages of ah.
I think what makes this particular Matt section so egregious to me is it actually ends really well. It actually ends where he's being Matt, but it's like half a page where it's like, yes, that's him. There he
Yeah,
is. I
but we
finally see
get,
him.
yes, I have indeed, Matt said, the oaths to the great Shanshan Empire, and the Empress
Mm-hmm.
herself, may she live forever. I'm just a poor traveling sellsword, once a tenant of House Hawk. A noble Hawk is actually a winery around here, by the way. That was out of story. A noble family in Burundi. I lost my eyes to some bandits' tween force 2 years back while protecting a young child I discovered in the woods. I raised her on my own, but and I'm like, what is Sanderson's obsession with Matt creating these backstories when he actually uses the same backstory later in one sentence? And it was nice.
Yep. 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 That's that's what I mean about when he finally gets to the tavern and he's sitting down for a drink and a meal, he is again, I think it's the monologue versus the dialogue because they're with with the proprietress and her man who's the, I guess former Sanchin military guy who's now the bouncer there, and because it's dialogue, he doesn't beat that dead horse. And so it flows much more naturally. And I had this kind of random thought as I was reading these Matt scenes and going back over my notes before we started. And it just kind of dawned on me of, hey, wait a minute, could this be that? How much of this comes from Sanderson and how much of this comes from RJ and his notes? And I was trying to think if there were instances in the last couple of RJ books, and I really couldn't think of anything like this, but it almost seems to me like what Sanderson is doing here is he's going way over the top to illustrate what happens when Matt tries to plan, to go way over the top to drive the point home that Matt is instinctual. Matt is the roll of the dice. Matt is the guy who in the Tower of Genji says, I'm just going to roll some dice and go in that direction.
I would take that benefit of the doubt from you, except that we don't see the other side of it in the rest of this book. Remember, this is okay. So we give Sanderson some slack in the first book because he admittedly said, I didn't know how to write Matt at that time. But this is the book where he says, I think I got it.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't get it. He's
Mm-hmm.
doing the same stupid shit.
Yeah, and to me so right here, kind of the second page, it's right after the part you were reading there, where he's going off on this long spiel of this stupid backstory that he had, um, and then when the soldier cuts him off and just waves him on, Matt goes through this internal monologue that is really annoying. Of Matt considered staying put out of principle. No, he wouldn't.
No, he wouldn't. He'd be
No,
like, I win. I win.
get me out of here. Um, why would the soldiers force people to wait in such a long line and give them time to think of a cover story only to not hear it out? That could offend a man. Not Matron Cawthon, who was always light-hearted and never offended, but someone else surely.
He,
That triggered because there's no way you could read that except for irony. The actual technical literary definition of irony is that the author is saying the opposite of what he means. That what Sanderson is saying there is this is what Matt is thinking, but he's rationalizing, and the opposite is what is actually true. And that just jumped out at me and said, oh my gosh, it's showing that this is the clearest evidence, the clearest example of how Sanderson just doesn't get Matt. He just doesn't get who he is at his core, the kind of guy that he is. That no, it wouldn't offend him. He'd be like, "Oh, cool, that worked. On I
yeah,
go."
yeah. He would have been like, whew, that was easier than I thought. Sorry for the hiccup. After the hurricane, we ended up in a drought, so I have to move around the sprinklers. So the previous owners to this house decided they wanted to grow bamboo, and they did not properly perimeter the root system. So if anybody who knows how bamboo grows, the roots are like a carpet underneath the ground, and it basically destroyed the whole sprinkler system. And we're too cheap to fix it, so I just move a sprinkler around the yard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Got to work on that in a couple of days. All right.
Yeah.
I think it's especially jarring that opening bit that just is so out of character because as I said, when he gets to the tavern, it is it's not just much better because it's much better. It's so different. It's like this is a totally different character who just walked into this bar.
Hmm.
It's not the same guy who was standing out at the gates because um when the guy who's this name James when he challenges Matt on his lies, Matt is just smoothly, hey buddy, believe me, don't believe me, I don't care. I'm just a dude, man. I'm just a dude looking for a drink and something to eat. So he just smoothly moves on. He doesn't belabor the point. It's just he's going with the flow, and the flow is, yeah, this guy thinks I'm suspicious, but he's not hostile. We seem to have a bit of banter going on here. The nice lady is keeping things under control, and so he's not gonna escalate. He's not gonna, you know, try and go overboard with the ridiculous clown stuff.
Hmm.
At no point does he turn himself into a clown to make himself less threatening. He's just, hey, let's all be friends. He's just being smooth. And then the reason this scene is so frustrating to me is that the very end of it is no, then there is a switch that flips that wait, someone's threatening my lady. Okay, I'm gonna stop hiding the hat and I'm gonna stop hiding the Ashendera blade, and you're gonna tell me who I have to kill here
Hmm.
because things just got serious. That on for me it's 253, which is the last page of this scene, and uh, what is it he said? What is it he says? Uh, oh yeah, yeah. So at the end here, when I'm gonna call him Jaime because I'm Texican, and that just amuses me to think of this Sanchin guy as a Jaime sitting in the.
That would be Jaime though.
I know, but I'm
Yeah.
just gonna pronounce it Jaime, and that they're having a Dos Equis. Okay, man. Uh, he calls Matt an assassin, and Matt takes offense to that, and he would of I'm no bloody assassin. I never kill a man unless he demands it. Demands it with screams and thunder so loudly, I figure it would be impolite not to agree to the request. If I stab you, friend, you'll know that it is coming, and you will know why. I promise you that.
This is
That.
this is a thought Matt would have, but this is where Sanderson just sucks at giving speeches.
Mm-hmm.
This was that proclamation moment, and it's like it just didn't fly for me. I don't know. I think you're saying you liked it, but it didn't fly for me.
That particular line was a bit clunky. Like that should have been like split in two because the that last bit there of if I stab you, you'll know it's coming and you'll know why. I promise you that. That should be a line you walk out on. But he kept going. That's always his problem with Matt.
Hmm.
Then it keeps going back and forth for a couple more lines. And no, that should be the line he walks out on, but he just can't help himself and he has to keep, adding to it and adding to it and adding to it when it's no, dude, it's done. Let it go, man. You know, it's good. It's done. Stop working on it.
Hmm.
You stop tinkering. Um, but that this is these last few pages of this scene are some of the closest he gets to getting Matt, which is why that opening is just so bloody jarring. And it's going to get worse here when we get to chapter 15 because then there's some stuff that he writes in chapter 15 that just even more egregiously contradicts stuff that happens here and shines a light on the bad parts.
Hmm.
So we'll get to that in a second. Do you have any more thoughts on this Matt scene before we move on to Rand and Moraine?
No, no. Again, my biggest thought was, yeah. Uh, yeah. Random or rain. anything I have to say is probably going to come up in the next Matt scene. So
Um, I do like the first page of this next scene with Rand and Moraine. Um, and Moraine, as usual, is trying to get him to move, trying to get him to do. It's so reminiscent of the opening to the Dragon Reborn, which I've got sitting here because I want to refer back to it in a little bit. But it's so reminiscent of that opening where they're hiding out and Rand is going kind of stir crazy, but it's kind of the inverted here, and it's because Moraine is so hyper focused. It's she has changed,
she's
she's evolved, but she's still Moraine the Blue.
yeah, and she's the epitome of the weakness of focus,
Mm-hmm.
where you're oblivious to the inputs around you because you're so focused on a single goal,
Yeah.
which, is great for things like archery or, uh, engineering, that kind of thing. But Rand is feeling the inputs around him. And actually, I can't remember what I should have made a note. There was something he said about compassion being the eyes he sees through or something. I'll try to find it while we're going, and I should have made a note on where that was, but I thought about it later is the problem leading up to this. But that was actually a good Sanderson moment because we talked about the difference between empathy, compassion, you
Well,
know,
that was
it,
actually what I was getting to is right at
yeah.
the beginning here. She's telling him to stay away from these lesser fights. My friends die here. I thought you were beyond such weaknesses. Compassion is not a weakness, is it not? She said. And if in sparing your enemy because of compassion you allow them to kill you, what then, Rand al'Thor? It's her view on compassion is kind of warped but kind of right, and it's totally in keeping with her.
It's the female view on compassion.
it it is interesting to me because she's evolved so much, so similar to Rand, and yet she doesn't understand who Rand has become. She kind of does. She thinks she does, but she doesn't get it all. She doesn't truly understand what it is that Rand has done here when it's he has embraced death, as the Aiel said. We spent a long time talking about what that really means
Hmm.
versus what Rand thought it meant.
It might be when he was fighting Tam. So
Yeah, there's more to say there.
yeah.
Um,
So yeah, I'll wait on that because I think it was what his revelations while he's with his father that he talks about compassion again.
um,
If not, we'll come back to it at the end.
oh, speaking of compassion, I hadn't even put these two things together here, but it's kind of funny because in looking for my next point here, just on the next page, speaking of compassion, and then Moraine is saying compassion is a weakness, and then he surprises her. He leaves her kind of literally speechless when he says, here I have a gift for you, and it's a Tarvalon silver mark. And no, it's not the same one from before, but I carried it with me as a memento, as a keepsake, as a reminder, and I want you to have it back. And uh it kind of shuts her up. I mean, she's clearly moved. We don't know how because we're inside Rand's head, but it's not until Lan comes up that she puts the coin away and resumes her Aes Sedai mask. So another interesting tweak on the whole idea of compassion there that they're arguing about.
Yeah, and it's we have to find the right word other than compassion, but it's like Christmas. You could give somebody something expensive or outdo the other person that gave them something, but sometimes you give them something that has some sort of value to it that shows that a year ago when they were telling you a story that you listened or something along those lines. And you can see it in somebody's face and how they react to the gift, even if its monetary value is nothing. And they're like, wow, this is my favorite gift of the day, right? Uh, and that's what he did there. He gave something that actually had meaning to it because the start of their relationship was her giving him
Hmm.
the silver mark. Now she did it for reasons, but to the young boy that took that silver mark, that was the beginning of the rest of his life, realistically. That was the beginning of his journey to be the Dragon Reborn, and he remembered that, and it hit home. And we get the same thing here in a couple paragraphs later with him giving something to Lan.
And then he
It's
has had his smiths, he has had people reforge the crown of Malkier, and he gives that to him. And I
well for him and Nynaeve.
and then
Yeah.
another, and one made for the queen as well, one for Nynaeve. And I love what he says though of this moment, and then I hate it, and I'll tell you why I hate it in a second, is because he says, Elaine taught me to rule, but you taught me how to stand. Thank you. And he's setting things right. He's doing the best he can and knowing all these different strings that are pulling on him. But I love that moment because it is Rand and Jordan and Sanderson and the reader all recognizing and just kind of coming full circle with Rand would not be here were it not for the help that Lan gave him in those first couple of books, especially
Mm-hmm.
of
Well,
looking out
especially
for him,
when he met the
mentoring him.
Mirror seat in the
Hmm.
beginning of book two.
Which is also
Yeah.
why I hate it because, oh, look, the crappy show has already ruined something else. Here at the
Yeah.
very end of the series, that's why I harped on on how terribly they mangled that scene in the second season, and because that's why Jordan is so awesome. That happened in book two, and here we are at of the end of the series, the end of all things in almost, and it's you taught me to stand. I still remember that moment. That impacted me and helped me all the way through. All right.
So why didn't you like it then?
No, that's why it's because I was like, I love that moment, and then it made me think of the crappy show, and I was like, dang it,
Oh, okay. You didn't.
stupid
Okay, so you
crappy
didn't like
show.
the show version of it,
No,
and
I
it
didn't like
reminded
that it
you of that.
reminded me
Okay.
of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was
Okay, I
like,
get it.
Thank you for intruding on my thoughts, you awful, awful show. Go away. Leave me alone.
Yeah. At least we don't have to deal with that till next year.
Um, chapter 12, I don't have a ton of thoughts on. Um,
Yeah, it's kind of just an action scene with Brigitte. I do
mhm,
like that she goes through the mental process of some of the things we've been talking about, or what are the metaphysics of the world, because she's
mhm,
actually contemplating this. Because I was ripped out, is this going to change everything for me when it comes to? Because I understand the world of dreams. I understand that it has something special as a place for where I was as being attached to the horn. But did that all change? I don't know. And she kind of goes through that mental process of a lot
mhm.
of the things we've been talking about, of speculating on where the world of dreams and how the people tied to it are affected by the weaving of the wheel, and if she was disrupted by that.
And
Which we do get an
that,
answer on this one. This is
oh,
not
oh,
this
oh,
one this knot gets
yes, but
untied at the end.
but over analyzing everything as we do here with this series is, you know, probably not an accident. Then the very next scene is Rand walking through a dream shard that he created.
Yeah.
And so she was just there thinking about the dream and thinking about the ramifications. And now we switch to Rand walking through a dream shard that Lanfear has managed to invade, which tells you how good she is with the dream. And
Well, she
I
claimed to be
love,
the best.
yes. And I loved the back and forth here between them. I love also that you get a bit of answer for what a dream shard is and how it's created, because he's thinking is kind of his loose Theron thoughts. But I also like the back and forth between Rand and Myron, as he keeps calling her, and how it's he doesn't just automatically burst the bubble. It's no, she keeps going. She's going to keep trying, and it takes a bit of back and forth, and there's a little bit of him on the edge going, is she really in trouble? No, 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 no. Yeah, she's messing with me. No, stay strong here, man. So I like that scene went back and forth for a little bit before she finally said, "All right, fine," and then stops trying to do whatever it is she's trying to do. Um, but to me, the most significant part of the scene is the end of it, the last page before it switches back to Perrin and the fighting in the Brame Wood. Uh, is where is it here? On this last page is he's basically kind of thinking how he got here and what's different now between Rand al'Thor and Lews Therin Telamon, and why and how Lanfear don't understand him. And I think you can add Moradin into this too, of how one of the reasons Rand is able to beat them is because he has this thought here. It was not Lews Therin who made up Rand's core. It was the sheep herder raised by Tam. And then that's going to come up at the end here whenever we finally get to chapter 15 and he finally goes back to Tam, is that simple thing made all the difference. Made a huge difference in who Rand is as a person. Do you have any more thoughts on that chapter before we go to 13?
Oh no, I think my note was it is slightly clunky because I know he doesn't understand the literature on it,
Mm-hmm.
but it was okay. The way he wrote, she's definitely a good example of borderline personality disorder and how dangerous that is, and how women actually with that characteristic do end up in high power situations because they're
You,
very
you,
good at using their attachment issues to gain power.
I wasn't planning on talking about it, but just for those of you out there listening and following along, think of that and pay attention to that in the next chapter when she has these interactions with Perrin.
Mm-hmm.
And look at the way the woe is me, the you know I'm always the victim, you don't know what I've been through, I deserve this, all these pathologies that she exhibits in her talks with Perrin, is you really see it there, I think.
Yeah, I saw in one of these red pill, whatever, Instagram reels, it was, what's the biggest red flag with dating women? And he said externalizing. And my first thought was, have you ever dated women? Because they pretty much all do that. But borderlines are great at it.
Mm-hmm.
You made me this. You did this to me. You made me mad. I wasn't mad except for you. That kind of stuff. And Lanfear is like the embodiment of it. She's almost like a caricature of
Mm-hmm.
it. But that actually makes sense if she's one of the top 9 most powerful evil people in the world. She's going to be a caricature of all the bad things in that realm.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is she's also the strongest female, because this is the female's strongest
Oh.
strategy for power attainment. And so look at politics and everything. Look at how they act. Look at how AOC acts. Look at how Nancy Pelosi acts. Look at how Nikki Haley acts. It is exactly the one statement that I've found as a red flag in talking to women is, "Oh, how are you?" And their answer is, "Oh, just a woman making it in a man's world." As soon as they say that, I'm like, "Peace out, baby. I don't care how hot you are." It hasn't been a man's world since the 1980s. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Go watch the or listen to the Peterson, and it was Mary Harrington.
Hmm.
They go through that all the way back through prehistory, really. They give you a nice little Cliff's Notes version of it. Speaking of strong female characters, chapter 13 starts with Egwene, and not it's interesting here. It's a nice scene. The Aes Sedai blow everything up, but something that jumped out at me that I don't think I'd really noticed before is I think this is a there's a brief little line here that I think is a purposeful merging. Like again, we're at the end here and it's the wheel of time. Everything's coming full circle. And we kind of started off with Rand and Egwene as kind of parallel characters.
Hmm.
And that actually deepens here in a way I hadn't really noticed before.
It
It's
did for me too, but I'm going to let you give your piece
so
first.
a
Yeah.
couple of pages in, towards the end of this short scene is on page 272 for me. Um, it's she felt as if she were one with the land itself, that she was doing the work it had longed for someone to do for so long. And that is a very Rand thing. I mean, that's literally what he has been doing. That's with the grass greening around him and all this. And she was just complaining about it and trying to figure out what's going on here. And now, for whatever reason, and I'm wondering, is it because he's the Tamarillin and she's the Emerillin? Is that part of the pattern weaving of, you know, because the Dark One is having such a sway on the world, it makes me wonder then, so then is the creator able to push on the scales on the other side a little bit more to help nudge the balance along? And so maybe Rand is the full avatar of the creator, but now maybe the creator can nudge a little bit more with some other people and give a little bit more of you know some X factor to some other people.
Or Rand isn't supposed to be the full avatar. And we need
Mm,
the yin yang to, which is the symbol of the Aes Sedai,
hmm,
to do it. And she needed to be part of that. Now, that was a good catch. I actually didn't catch that when I did, but mine actually goes back to the scene Rand just had where he's fighting the Dreadlords in the Gap. And he went through expecting a certain thing and he attacked in a certain way and got something different. And he realized he made the mistake. Where I was reading this, I was saying she's doing exactly what Rand did. This isn't the best use of the Aes Sedai because, yeah, we saved a lot of lives in the moment,
mhm.
but realistically, the Aes Sedai should be sitting back while the armies fight, waiting for the Dreadlords to come in so they can take care of that. Where they could have been in the same trap. They could have exhausted themselves here, and then the Dreadlords come in and play cleanup
That's
and
a
done
good
the
point.
same thing to their army because they don't care Trollocs die. These are just masses of bodies to them.
Hmm.
You know, this is why I hated the Summer of Love. They called everybody bodies, right? That's what the Trollocs are. The Trollocs, the evil army, these are just bodies. I don't care how many of them die as long as we win. And what I was kind of expecting the first time I read this, and then almost expecting this being the second time I've read through this, I was almost expecting Dreadlords to come in at the last minute and take them while they were tired, you know. And that actually would have been a big lesson that Rand just learned, and Egwene still hasn't learned because it didn't happen.
Um, then it switches to Elaine and Bashir,
Hmm.
and Elaine having to make some hard decisions, which this is why her character is so frustrating to us because she recognizes the trade-offs, she recognizes the costs, and it has a, you know, meaningful impact to her as a person, unless she's doing it herself. When she's Queen Elaine, you know, she recognizes these things and she acts accordingly, and there is some pathos there. But when she's superhero Aes Sedai adventurer Elaine, and then she never seems to care what it costs other people. Um, but that's just me bitching and moaning. The scene itself is written well,
Yeah,
and
well,
then
the whole time I'm going through the Perrin Elaine sections here in the wood, Brigitte section, I just can't help but be like, This is the worst use of the dragons in this whole series. They should have been at Tarwin's Gap,
Hmm.
blowing holes in the funnel of people that are coming through the or Trollocs that are coming through the gap.
Hmm.
This is where they should have been because it's a wide open field. They can just blast away at their
Yeah.
convenience. But we're in the woods fighting in the middle of, yeah, it just, this was the worst way you could use Matt's big accomplishment of the last 13 books.
I think the logic was when they talked about who's going where. I think the logic was this is supposed to be our strongest force because this army, the Trolloc army in Andor is the one we're trying to beat first.
Yeah, but you could have had a whole regiment from the Gap come to the wood to replace 12 dragons. You know, it would have,
Hmm.
it's just,
Yeah,
I don't
and
know.
it
I hate that Sanderson just absolutely doesn't understand military movements or
it also
anything, but
doesn't understand Matt, but we'll get to that in a second because
yeah.
why is
I
the
mean,
band
even
here?
Talmany's in this section is like, my dragons are useless right
Mhm.
now.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we used them as best we could, and now they're
It would
not
have
doing
made more
anything.
sense if they were like, okay, well, we're gonna blow the walls of Camelin down so we can get in
Mhm.
there quicker. Okay, that would have made sense, but they didn't do that. They didn't even think of doing that.
Um, when it when it switches to parents' point of view here, there's a couple of interesting things. One, just the second page, which is 277 for me. This is actually humor done well, again, because it's restrained and it's fitting. It's what Perrin says and what Tam says makes sense for the character in the moment, and he doesn't keep going. It's just a line. There's this great line here at the bottom of the page where when Perrin's turning authority of the army over to Tam because he has to go do his Tavarin thing now. And Tam says, "Is it too late to turn you over to the women's circle for a good talking to? Maybe a sound swat in the behind and a week spent carrying water for Widow Althone." And then that's it. They don't have to keep going back and forth and making more references and more jokes. It's just it's him making an offhand comment because this is annoying. This is not what I want, but it's also is what it's going to be. So let's move on. Um, the other thing that jumped out at me a couple pages later is who is it who sets this up? Um, oh, it's when okay, so then Perrin goes to Rand to ask him, hey, you got all that Age of Legends knowledge in your head. Surely you know how to get me into the world of dreams in the flesh. And um, yeah, the very bottom of page 280 here. Perhaps Rand found if I'd known back when and there's another thing that just put a pin in that can talk about later is what was he going to say there? Well, let's just say that some would call your request very, very evil. It's not evil, Rand, Perrin said. I know something evil when I smell it. This isn't evil. It's just incredibly stupid, but it got to be done.
Yeah.
Um,
That was a little bit of good humor. I thought maybe slightly on the edge of over the top, but
mhm.
I we need to go back a little bit because I don't want to downplay a moment that Sanderson did well. As we poop on him a lot, I want to
Mhm.
throw a good one in. Bornhold and his confession.
Yes, I forget. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the way it was just like, okay, well, I told you the truth now. I'm going to go back. It wasn't like, again, like you said, sometimes less is more. And he came and made his confession, and Perrin was like, oh, well, there's a childhood trauma that I have to relive, you know?
Hmm.
And Bornhold's like, okay, I
But
got that off my chest. I'll
I
see you
gotta I gotta
later.
get this off my conscience because we all may die
Yeah.
soon, and you may die, and so you have the right to know this. Yeah.
Hmm.
And then now I'm leaving.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um.
Which, I would have liked Gala to be able to hear it because that would have been a good moment for Gala to be like, do we need to bring justice here? Because you're complicit, my friend, you
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that would put a bit of a twist on the justice that Gallet had sentenced Perrin to. It's yeah, but oh, by the way, we kind of did this to him too.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Well, and this coming up now versus this coming up during the trial or whatever,
mhm.
Gal would have been like, you fucking killed his family and you expected him to be reasonable. I don't know. I think that would have been a big moment for the children aren't what the children are supposed to be in Galad's mind.
Mhm.
And I would have liked more of that. You know, sometimes less is more. More of that earlier in the series with Bornhold, maybe even a perspective from his own mind would have been good because that's a big deal. I mean, this little thing that's what, 4 paragraphs maybe,
Mhm.
and some of them really short paragraphs. It was it was a defining moment in Perrin becoming Perrin. And then
That's true.
yeah.
Uh, Speaking of big moment that is kind of goes by fast, my last bit here is so Rand says we're gonna have to leave because I can't do this here near Shalgul because of the influence of the Dark One, the way Shalgul works. And then but here's what's interesting to me. Um, you cannot enter the dream from we have to leave the blasted lands, and he stops. He trailed off, then did something, crafting a weave. A gateway opened beside him. Something about it was different from ordinary ones. I see, Rand said. The worlds are drawing together, compressing. What was once separate is no longer so. So that's a big clue on what's going on here at the
Mhm.
end. And that is why, however long ago it was, you pointed it out. I don't even remember which book we were in, when you made the point of the world of dreams is a much bigger thing than we thought when we first read this series.
Book 2.
Yeah. And and we've been paying attention to what happens in the world of dreams, the nature of the world of dreams, the nature of the world of dreams in relation to the real world. And that has been such a big deal going forward, and it's becoming a bigger deal here as Rand just said, you know, the worlds are compressing. Well, what the heck does that mean? And how's that gonna affect things? Well, we'll see here eventually. Um, but chapter 14 quickly, and then we can beat our heads against the desk, finishing up with chapter 15 here. Chapter 14 is a pretty lengthy chapter, but it's a pretty
Basic.
action oriented,
Yeah.
fast paced chapter. There's a lot of it's Perrin and Gaul going to the Black Tower in the World of Dreams. It's what's going on with Androl and Taim and Logain and all that. Um, so I only had a couple of notes here on chapter 14.
Yeah, my
Uh,
only real note on Perrin was and this is Perrin's weakness is he's so this is where hyper focus gets in the way. He's a very focused, very conscientious individual, but that also leads to assumptions because if you're trying to predict the future so you can do the thing you need to do, you have to make assumptions along the way. And his big assumption, which turns out to be something wrong here, and luckily Lanfear of all people saves him. He assumed there were no guards. He assumed Slayer acts alone because typically Slayer does act alone. Slayer's a hunter. He's the stalker. He's all these things. But not only do we have the 2 guards here, but we have from Slayer's previous encounter with Lanfear in whatever that city, Thakandar or whatever it is that he's in the Blight. He has accomplices now in the Red Aiel. So this is not a good assumption. You can't
yeah,
assume that this guy is going to be acting alone. Assume the worst. Plan for the worst and hope for the best, right?
you're not
And
acting alone. You brought a friend here.
yeah, and
Yeah.
he's lucky to not have walked right in on these Asha Aman that are right there. So
Yeah. Um, there is some interesting back and forth with Perrin in Lanfear here, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole yet. Like I said, I think when we talk about things the after we're done with the series, if we want to focus on particular issues, points, whatever, the nature of turning, I think, wraps into the nature of free will, the soul, and these things. And Lanfear gets into it a little bit here when she's explaining what turning is to Perrin, because she has to explain it like she's explaining it to us, the reader. That's kind of why this is happening, because Perrin is our avatar here because he has no clue about any of this stuff. So she has to explain it like she's explaining it to a child, because he basically is in this instance. And so there's something there, because she talks about how you lose something in the transformation, and then there's it's not even sure exactly what that is. She makes the point that some think it's this. It might be, it might not be. And I was like, oh, that's creepy. The only other thought I had on this is at the end of the Androl scene here, before we get to Perrin and Lanfear, when Androl is so powerful, he manages to make a coin-sized gateway, even with the Dream Shard blocking gateways, which is pretty cool. But then I had this thought of, where'd it go? I don't think it ever explains. Where's the other end of that? Because here in a little bit,
Yeah,
when Perrin gets
something got
rid,
wiped out of the pattern, and we don't know what
exactly,
it is.
because we know Androl. I mean, it's got to go somewhere. And here at the end of this chapter, when Perrin finally gets rid of the Dream Spike, or Lanfear gets rid of the Dream Spike, and Androl realizes, oh, that barrier is gone. I can make real gateways now, and he makes a big one in front of the evil casters, and then opens the other end behind them so that they blow themselves up. And so I don't think it's ever said, and it's just bothering me to know what just got bail fired, because something did.
Well, but remember the other guys came down because they heard him because of that coin-sized one he opened.
See, I thought that was referring to one that he tried to make earlier.
Oh, it might have been, yeah. But that's the only one he successfully opened, so
Well, that's true, because he has this thought that he must have opened one so small and he didn't even realize it, but maybe not. Maybe he did bail fire off into the air somewhere next to those guys, and someone just got lucky they're still here. All right. Do we need to pause a second before we get into chapter 15?
yes, because I got 3 minutes till turn off my sprinkler, so might as well do that now.
All right. All right. So chapter 15, the dreaded chapter 15. Let's start with the section in the middle, because there's 2 points of view here. It starts with Matt, and then it switches to Rand, and then it finishes with Matt and what's going on in Ibu Dar with him and Tawan. And the Matt section all needs to go together because there's problems in both parts, and it's all kind of one scene. Um, one of the things that makes this chapter so jarring to me is that, so several 4 or 5 pages in, so it's page 306 in the first edition hardback, here is where it switches to the Rand point of view. This is some of Sanderson's best writing in the whole series for me. This is, for I would probably put this scene in the top 10 of the whole series. That's how important the scene is, and how well written I think the scene is. That it's not going to be up there with the ones that I've mentioned before that I love so much that Jordan wrote, but it's up there. That's how good I think this is, and I think that's one of the reasons this chapter was so jarring to me, because of how frustrating the Matt scenes that are sandwiched around it are. Um, and I'm not even sure how to talk about this scene, because when I was jotting down some notes, I was kind of realized, well, I can't just read the whole dang thing. It's like 6, 7 pages long, but it's all great. I mean, it starts off with Miranda's still going around giving out gifts, um, which makes sense because as far as he's concerned, he's a dead man walking.
Hmm.
Um, and so of course one of the ones he's got to go to is his father to say thank you. And I took your sword and I wasn't able to give it back, so here's one I found to replace it. Um, and it's not clear, but did he just give him um Archer Hawkwing's sword? Because we know
He,
he found it and he's been carrying it around. Is that what he
yeah,
just gave him?
it implies here that it was Lews Theron's sword
Mm.
because he says it was once mine or something along those lines. He said it was once a kindred spirit, I think.
Yeah, kindred spirit.
Yeah.
That's why I was wondering, is that
Well,
because
the way he said it made me thinking he was talking about Lews Theron in his head, a kindred
well,
spirit.
but
But
he's also been compared and compared himself to Hawkwing
yeah.
because
But did
Hawkwing was a
Hawkwind have
comparable.
dragons on his sword?
Well, that's a good point of where did that scabbard come from? Because the
Hmm.
scabbard seems to have been, but
Or
I
is that
got
the
the
scabbard that Avienda made for him?
no,
Oh, she
the
made a belt
scabbard,
buckle. She made a belt buckle. Yeah,
yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
The scabbard that he made for Layman's sword. Um, I don't know what happened to that. I don't know what happened to Layman's sword. So maybe I have to look up Rand's swords here,
Yeah,
but
because Tam's sword got basically fried
melted
inside of
mhm,
Ishamael.
at
Uh,
the end of the Great Hunt.
hmm. And then he goes feral after that for a little while. And then
Uh-huh.
what does he use?
He uses Kalendor as a sword when he's fighting
Mm.
Balal, and then when he fights Balsamon at the end of the Dragon Reborn, he's wielding Kalendor as a sword.
And he
Um,
and he gets Layman's sword coming out of the waist after Rydian, right?
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah. So as far as I can remember, he's not using one through book four. Until sometime at the beginning of book five, Avienda gives him the layman's sword. And then out of nowhere, he finds Justice Hawkwing's sword, which I pointed out to me that was kind of an annoying little tidbit that this comes out of nowhere. It's like I feel like this really needed more setup, and it's like, are you kidding me? You found Archer Hawkwing's sword, and it's just going to be mentioned in passing, and then we're going to kind of forget about it. That always annoyed me. But anyway, I'm digressing here. Of otherwise, what is a great scene here is so he gives him the sword, and he's doing his thank yous, and then on page 308 this is kind of the start of where this whole scene is going because it starts with Rand talking about the flame and the void, and the way he puts it is when he's Tam doesn't want the sword. It's too nice. It's too fancy. Think of it as a thank you, Rand said, from all the world to you. If you had not taught me the flame and the void all those years ago, like Tam, I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be dead, I'm sure of that. To think, if you hadn't wanted me to be a good archer, I'd have never learned the things that kept me sane through the rough times. Tam sniffed. The flame and the void aren't about archery. Yes, I know, they're a swordsman's technique. They're not about swords either, Tam said, strapping the sword under his belt. But the flame and the void are about center, Tam said, and about peace. I would teach it to each and every person in this land, soldier or not, if I could. And then that's what he does. Essentially, that's what he's doing in this scene is he's teaching without telling because he takes him to spar because he recognizes, and again, I'm wondering what the notes were for this scene because I can't help but think about that interview with Jordan saying, well, it doesn't affect the way I write action, if that's what you mean, but having seen combat, it affects the way I write soldiers, the way I write, especially veterans who have been there. And Tam, we only get hints at he saw a lot of action, it would seem. I mean, he would have had to rise as high as he did, coming from nowhere, as well as being incredibly talented with the sword. But he has to know what it's like to be maimed in combat, to have seen someone maimed in combat and having to live with that.
Hmm.
And we've mentioned before that surveys of soldiers have shown they fear dismemberment more than they fear death, and that is a component of psychological warfare, is to manipulate that. And Rand he's, I mean,
Which is funny because the unknown versus the
mm-hmm,
is, there's a lot of research on people who are paralyzed or otherwise dismembered and how quickly people adapt to that and they actually become
mm-hmm,
resilient.
mm-hmm,
And this is Rand's becoming resilient to his disability.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then
And in
if
fact,
cup
this is a parallel because we got Androl and Tame, right? Taim. What is Androl
That's a good
but
point.
a one-handed fighter? I mean, he's a one-trick pony.
Mm.
And you got Taim, who for the first 13 books in his dealings with Rand is like, why do we need to use the sword? Why do we need to learn this? We've got the power.
That's
And that's Taim's hubris. That's his weakness. And Rand is falling into that same weakness. He's like, well, I lost a hand. I might as well just be power.
that's a great point, because that's exactly where I was going, which was page 310. Um, I don't need the sword to fight any longer. I have the one power. That would be important, Tam said, if sparring right now had anything to do with fighting. It's I'm teaching you. This is a lesson. This isn't about technique. This isn't about, you know, training to win a duel. That's not what this is about. And then the back and forth, the frustration that Rand has that he can't do this, and he's recognizing, you know, the way Tam is moving, he's clearly trained one-handed, because he's not making the same mistakes I am. He's moving more naturally.
Yeah,
And
and I read that a little differently, and Rand is making excuses in his head.
yes.
I wasn't taught this. I wasn't taught this, so this is why
Mm-hmm.
I'm losing,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah. And I think that he's, Tam, being the wise person that he is, has got to see that. And so the next page, as Rand is going, rationalizing in his head, Tam says, "Let go, son. Let go of what? Everything." Yeah, that's the point. And as he says at the very end, the last couple of lines of this scene, "It has been quite a wait, hasn't it?" Tam asked. "What wait?" Rand replied. "That lost hand you've been carrying." Rand looked down at his stump. "Yes, I believe it has been at that." All right, that's the good parts done with. Let's go back to the beginning of the chapter and begin cutting
Oh,
myself. All right. This all right. What my first note is a couple of pages in, where he has this thought as he's climbing. Um he had not survived this long by taking fool chances, luck or no luck. Um One of the reasons that jumped out at me is because it seemed, it's better Matt, but it's in contrast with who he was being in chapter 11, especially the beginning of chapter 11. And then it gets worse as I keep going down that page, because there's a one sentence paragraph here on rational. He would be very rational. And that line bothered me. And I was like, it just doesn't sound like Matt for some reason.
yeah, no.
And I was going back over I went back up and I was rereading this page, and it's kind of just dawned on me, oh, it's because he's being highly unrational and not Matt like right before that.
Hmm.
Because what is he thinking as he's climbing up? to where he assumes Tawan is going with Tawan's rooms is and it's also in contrast with what he just did. It's like the end of his scene in chapter 11 was so great because he pulls the cover off his Ashandara, he puts his hat on, and he says, "I don't kill man unless he's asked for it." And basically, he's saying, "And Galgan asked for it." Right? And yet, as he's climbing up, he's thinking, well, if Tawan's gonna stay here surrounded by assassins, that's her business. I'm just gonna tell her, what's what, and then I'm gonna go my own way. And he thinks the same thing with Rand, which is, let's see. He would climb up, explain to her in very rational tones that she needed to leave the city and that this General Galgan was betraying her. Then he would saunter on his way and find himself some games of dice. That was why he had come to the city, after all. If Rand was up north where all the Trollocs were, then Matt wanted to be as far from them as the man as possible. He felt bad for Rand, but any sane person could see that Matt's choice was the only one. Matt is not that stupid. This is
No,
not Matt from the Great Hunt.
yeah, well, no, this is not the Matt we developed over 13 books.
Yeah.
That's the problem is after the losing your eye and saving Moiraine and everything, Matt had settled himself into the role as the leader of the band. As of
Exactly.
Knife of Dreams, that was the last Jordan one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he had settled himself into that role. He grumbled and groaned about it, but this is the Matt from book maybe 2, where he just wanted to get away. He wanted to he didn't want to go home, but he didn't want to be there. It's the Semisonic song, right? It's you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. That was Matt, right? This is basically a regression. Everything we complained about with Perrin was a regression, right? This is a regression of Matt. Why is he running away? And if the whole world, we get it coming forward here, but his running away would take him back to the front. That's the Matt we know. And his grumbling in his head and everything, he would have been back with the band because he's like, well, I'm not safe here, but I'm safer than elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but that would have been inconvenient for getting the Seanchan involved unless you actually are creative enough to do that, which I don't think Sanderson was. But yeah, there's too much. So that part aside, that this is not Matt at all. Then we get too much of Sanderson just thinks he's funnier than he really is.
Mm-hmm.
324 on mine. It's when he's climbing and he's talking about how you can smell the sea breeze. Things smelled better when you were up high. Perhaps that's why head smelled better than feet did. I'm like, what? That was the dumbest. I just gave you credit for the best 7 words. You just had the worst 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 words in the whole book. The worst 10 words in the whole book right here. What the hell? In the next paragraph, you said stupid thought that Matt told himself. I'm like, yeah, it was a stupid thought. You should never have written it. I don't care if you're going in and like having him second guess his own thoughts. It was just completely retarded. Oh, did that get us canceled? That word? Probably. Yeah. Sanderson just thinks he's funnier than he is.
Yeah.
Is part of the problem here.
And then it gets a little bit better with Seleucia because there's dialogue, there's back and forth.
In fact, except I didn't think it got better. My note on that was, the stupid ass banter was my note on that.
The banter goes on for way too long. The one thing I liked about this moment was I knew you were a bodyguard, that he almost got shot in the face, but Guy being Guy, Matt being Matt. No, he wants to make sure he points out that, hey, I was right all along. You're a bodyguard. You're not just the voice or whatever.
Yeah, that was okay. But the banter I just hated it. Oh.
It needed to be cut down. It needed to be this, and it is really, I don't want to say this because such an a-hole thing to say of, there may need to be some blame here on Harriet and Maria for not editing this, focusing this. Now, granted, you can give
we knock
slack
Sanderson
to Harriet, But
we knock Sanderson, but no, they were the ultimate
mhm,
harbingers of the whole thing. They were the ones that said, yeah, that's the vision we wanted. And they could have nixed anything at any time.
yeah,
And so yeah, there's a lot of blame to go around.
yeah,
Well, and on the publishers, everybody. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Of yeah, we don't know the ins and outs of what was going on. Of Harriet was the editor, but how much was she working here after her husband's death, and should the publishers have given her some more help of, hey, you don't need to be carrying all this burden.
Working with a recent widow that actually wants to spread the legacy of their deceased husband. The amount of attention to detail and don't
Mm,
disgrace the person that I loved is through the roof. So I don't give it a pass. I think it's actually a
mm.
strength in that portion, and this fell through. It really did.
The well, let me think about what order I want to go in here with my thoughts. But okay, so to your point, the banter goes on for way too long, and then Seleucia reveals, "Oh, hey, there's a secret tunnel here you never knew about that'll take you down to the gardens." All right, well, that's convenient. Um,
Well,
but
not
then
only
when
is it
he
convenient, we have a moment there where I'm just like, my note is Sanderson is writing this mat scene like a D&D Easter egg. Search for secret doors, which is what you do in a Dungeons and Dragons game every time you walk into a new room if you're the rogue, right? You,
and you know to your point about the not as funny as he thinks he is, and the reason is because he can't be focused, especially when he's writing Matt, is that that little D&D Easter egg of let's see, it's yeah, for me it's page 305 down on the bottom. Matt muttered, no wait, that's not what it was. Yeah, yeah, where is it? Dang it. There's a um yeah, when she opens it up, I'm trying to find it, but there's a moment where he goes, dang it, I guess I should have thought to look for that first.
Mhm.
And that's fine in a vacuum. The problem is we're not in a vacuum here. We are in a scene that goes on for way too long, has a bunch of contradictions, has
Yeah,
a
it's
bunch of
338
banter
for
that,
me. It says maybe there was a lesson in there somewhere.
yeah.
Maybe it was that Matt Cawthon should look for secret passages before deciding to scale bloody four-story buildings.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it loses all of its impact because, yeah, okay, fine. I mean, yeah, whatever. It's just you know,
No, remember we
death by a
enjoyed
thousand
the
jokes.
Dungeons and Dragons movie because it was lighthearted and funny and had a lot of little Easter eggs from tabletop games and stuff. That doesn't belong here because this is an
No.
epic fantasy.
Mm,
This isn't a tabletop game caricature that we expect that we got in that movie, and that's what we expected because it was
that's a good
that way
point.
from the beginning. No, this was a serious novel, the series of novels going into this, and he's playing it like a sitcom.
Hmm. And then you get, to me, I think you get kind of a double whiplash because then it cuts to that great scene of Rand and Tam. But then
Mhm.
when it cuts back to Matt, again, it's not it's not the same character. It's not the same character we just saw in the earlier scene in this chapter, and it's not the same character we saw in chapter 11 when we first saw him getting to Ibudar and setting all of this up. Because when Matt sneaks in to the bushes and he's sitting and he's watching Tawan. This is why he came to Ibudar. The Matt that we have known for, you know, we're in the 14th book now. We did 11 books with the original author, so the definitive authority on Matt, and the Matt we got to know up through Knife of Dreams, you know, to your point, it's he had fully embraced I am the leader of the band. And even with Sanderson, yeah, that those chapters were gobbledygook and it was painful to read, but it was Matt was the leader. And now all of a sudden he's abandoning him. No,
Mhm.
the reason he came to Ibudar, the reason the real Matt came to Ibudar is because that's his wife over there. And yeah, he never wanted one or thought he never wanted one. And yeah, things get here in a weird way, but gosh darn it, that's my wife. I need to figure out how she feels about me. I need to figure out how I feel about her. I need to figure out what the heck is going on here. And oh, yeah, she's in danger. So, she's a woman and she's in danger. So that is a big red flag there. And two, it's my woman and she's in danger. And so now we go to paperback of The Dragon Reborn, and I refer to this frequently, the chapter A Hero in the Night. And the reason I keep going back to this is Tammuz is threatening Aludra, and then on page 471 of The Dragon Reborn, suddenly there was a knife in his hand. It will be a great pleasure to cut your throat, Aludra. Matt was not even aware that he had stood up until one of the doubled ropes dangling from the ceiling was in his hand and he had launched himself out of the loft. Burn me for a bloody fool, he thinks in his head. He only had time for that one frantic thought, and then he was plowing through the cloaked men, sending them toppling like pins in a game of bowls. Matt was not even aware that he had stood up, because that's who the real Matt is. Matt isn't going to, well, the last battle is here, and that's going to suck, and a lot of people are going to die, so I'm just going to go spend it dicing in a tavern in Ibu Dar.
Mm-hmm.
No, never.
No. Yeah, and this is where storylines, and I want who commented that we'll never know until we get the source notes. But I think it was Scott that commented that. But this is okay, so I'm going to combine Matt and Perrin here, because if you look at the progression from the beginning to now, where we got Schlag with Perrin and where we got Schlag with Matt is they actually took a break from their character progression. So Perrin, his wolf nature actually leads him to the direction we're going now, where he's going to be protecting Rand's back as a single person. And Matt had a deviation from being the general to go save Moiraine in a solo quest, basically a 3-person quest. But we needed to come back to that. Perrin went to his solo nature as the wolf, with the dream spikes and everything, but we never got the coming back for Matt. And what we should have got here probably, and where Sanderson probably didn't pick it up, or Jordan didn't have it in the notes or whatever, was probably a merging of what Perrin did in bringing the two rivers together with what Matt did in bringing the band together. And the two rivers merge into the band and become one big giant unit under Matt. And so he can become the general again, whereas Perrin can become the wolf, as he was slated to do from book 1, right? So we've got these two things, these paths that were slated from the very beginning, and Perrin kind of goes back into that, but Matt never goes back into that. We don't get him re-merging with the band. We don't get him going back. Now we get something like it going forward, but it's very forced, and it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah, and we'll get to that when we get to it. But here's why this really doesn't work for me. So this is page 313. It's the very beginning of when we've come back to Matt's point of view, and it starts with Tyland's secret passage leading to the gardens, and I don't know that I've really noticed this in this way before, and he's thinking about the rot, the everything dying, and Matt was pretty sure Rand was to blame. Rand or the Dark One. What the heck kind of jerk face a-hole friend thinks that about the best friend that he's known since they were wee lads? Yeah, Matt can be a caustic jerk sometimes.
Yeah,
But
again, this was Matt from book 2. where he was, oh my gosh, you can channel, oh, I need to get away from you.
Hmm.
But this is not Matt from even when did he last interact with Rand? Was that book Crown of Swords, maybe? He
Uh,
sent him off to, no, it was before that.
it was before that. It was Lord of Chaos where he sends him off to go get Egwene and Elaine and
Yeah, yeah. So
or
he's already past
yeah.
this. He's past this, you know, 8 books ago.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's never come back. That thought of Rand as the bad guy, yeah, Rand's crazy. Yeah, the who knows how much of my friend is left, but he's still Rand. I mean, he still gives a damn. You see that in the way he acts with Egwene and Nynaeve especially when Nynaeve and Elaine are giving him such headaches. But by golly, this is my friend from my village. You ain't gonna treat her like that. You see that throughout that whole sequence when they're together. Um, and this just jumped out at me and made me go, hold on, did Matt just compare Rand to the Dark One?
Yep.
That oh geez. And this is when I thought it feels bad to say it, but I really feel like you know Harriet or Maria should have caught this and said, that's no. This is going way past not figuring out the voice, not figuring out how to write Matt from the first book. This
Yeah, well,
is egregious.
the problem is the masculinity that Matt represents is one that females don't understand.
Hmm.
They understand the solid husband. They understand the what they think a man should be. But Matt is a man that actually baffles women. They can't help but love him, but at the same time, he's masculine in his own way. You know, they don't understand the guy that's gonna throw everything to the side and dive into danger because they never would. They don't understand it. And so that's where Jordan himself actually came into this because he understood it as a man. He
Hmm.
probably lived it in his military days. So it's yeah, I don't I yeah, they should have been there, but at the same time, this is where I think Sanderson was the wrong guy because he's not a very masculine man. And so he doesn't understand. This is where Clint Eastwood probably could have wrote this better, right? I'm not kidding. I mean,
Yeah.
look at the first, 11 books of Matt and tell me that's not Clint Eastwood.
No, that is an analogy that was made when he got the hat. It
Mm-hmm.
was that Matt is the man with no name from the classic westerns.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of hero he is the guy that comes into town, the man with no name, and you know
Well, I mean, he's the
saves the
last
day,
Boy Scout. He's
maybe even
Clint. Yeah,
begrudgingly. Yeah.
yeah. Bruce Willis. He's what was Bruce Willis's name in The Fifth Element?
You know, Corbin Dallas.
Corbin
Yeah.
Dallas. Yeah, he's Corbin Dallas. That this is why modern movies suck when it comes to male heroes because women are writing these things now and they can't write that man.
You know, a great portrayal of Matt is one of the few remakes that I actually think is as good, if not better, than the original, which was came out in like 2015 or 2016, The Magnificent Seven,
Oh,
with
yes.
Antoine Fuqua, who's one of the most horribly underrated. To me, he's our generation's John McTiernan. McTiernan did Hunt for Red October and Die Hard and a bunch of stuff, and like everything he did was good, if not great. And I feel that way about Fuqua, and Denzel Washington is the lead, and I have to feel like that was inspired by Bass Reeves because that glorious mustache that he has. But
Well, Bass
Chris
Reeves is a
Pratt,
guy that is similar to Matt too.
but the character Chris Pratt plays is the comic relief, but it's balanced because it's an ensemble cast because he's Chris Pratt the jokester, but it's balanced with Denzel Washington's much more serious character. It's balanced against some of these others, and it's balanced because there are times where that character gets kind of dark. Like when he
Hmm.
gets threatened and he's like, we were having fun. Why'd you have to go and do that?
I'll give you
You know?
another example. Val Kilmer's best role, Doc Holliday. He gets dark. I'll be your Huckleberry sounds like a good little one liner, but no, he's saying someone's dying today in that
Hmm.
moment. You
Yeah,
know.
they call back to it at the very end there of we started a game and we never finished it.
Hmm.
Of yeah, this is he is being jokesy there, but no, yeah, because we're gonna play a game, but it's a very serious, deadly game. Yeah.
Hmm.
uh I actually stumbled across an interview of Michael Biehn talking about that scene and how they just went off on their own to rehearse it. They were like that he said Val came to me early in the morning is like I'm gonna work on this. And it was just the two of us off by the trees just
Yeah, I don't know what they did to
working
him
on
to
it.
get him that pale and sweaty at that moment, and
Hmm.
he looked so sick. But he gets up and he's like, "I'll be your Huckleberry," and
Hmm.
that was like, that's it. I mean, I don't know how he didn't win an Oscar right there, but
Yeah.
yeah.
um all of those
But again, to
characters.
Sanderson, I don't think he can write that because he
Yeah,
doesn't know
yeah.
what that's like. He doesn't know that moment. He's basically been a overweight, nerdy writer all his life. You know, it's
You brought up female CEOs and how almost all of them were college athletes. Kurt Russell was a college athlete.
mm-hmm,
So yeah, you can think, oh well, he grew up in Hollywood, and he did. His dad was a very successful um, writer, director, actor. But then Russell wasn't originally going to go that route. He was in some stuff as a kid because it was stuff that his dad was in, but his initial goal was baseball, and he was a phenomenal college and then minor league baseball player. So and if you go down a rabbit hole on Tombstone, was apparently a hot mess of a production. And so Russell ended up kind of partly writing that movie because they had to kind of work on the script as they were going because everything the production was a mess. And that shows that someone like that grasps that idea of masculinity. You know, that it's not an accident that Russell plays the kind of characters that he does, and he plays them so well.
mm-hmm. As we escape from LA.
Yes. I love that movie. I didn't at first, and then it grew on me. Kind of like Last Action Hero, the Schwarzenegger's Last
Oh,
Action
I
Hero, which
love
was
that one
phenomenal.
from the beginning.
Yeah,
That was
I
fun.
liked that one better because that was more obviously parody. I think in hindsight, I think Escape from LA was kind of a parody that people didn't get, and
Hmm.
including me, because the first one was so serious, and the second one was not. Um, Anywho,
Anywho,
do
okay,
you
we
have thoughts on the rest of this scene, how things play out here?
no, I think the end of this actually recovered because I do agree with how he wrote let me find it here. It's near the end when he says you gave me the biggest compliment
Oh
you
yeah, yeah,
could,
yeah.
where you saw me with the knife, but you looked over your shoulder instead of coming
You didn't
at
call for
me.
the guards. You didn't attack
Yeah.
me. You didn't what? Yeah, you looked over
Yeah.
your shoulder to see what I
Yeah.
was aiming at.
I think that one he hit the nail on the head
Hmm.
with that compliment. And her reaction to it was kind of bleh. But then finally, another page and a half later, we get her saying, well, okay, well, if it makes you feel better, it is good to see you. That was okay. I was
Hmm.
cool with that. That was fine. Uh but yeah, from a guy's perspective, that would be a huge compliment in that exact situation. The way it unfolded, the way it unfolded was dumb. But if that was the scenario, and
Yeah.
she saw you with a knife and saw where you were aiming the knife instead of going after you, that would be a huge compliment. I agree.
I just had this thought too about this scene, about the end of the scene here when they come and they're ready.
Dick Giggity.
I didn't mean that. That's here in a second.
She did
But
say she
when
wanted an heir.
yep, when uh Musenge and the other guy, the Death Watch guy, Kared, come up and are ready to commit seppuku because they failed, and she says there is no failure because it was a supernatural creature, and the Prince of
No, no,
Ravens will
no, no,
teach you
don't skip
how to
one
find
part.
them.
Your life is mine, not yours. That's important
It's
because
true too.
the one thing
Yeah,
about the
yeah,
Shanshin is yeah,
yeah. Don't
in
skip
her
over the creepy.
yeah, in her interactions as far as, well, I need to make a baby for the Empire and I da 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 da. This is where collectivism goes too far because there is zero autonomy.
Hmm.
And we're Jordan up to a book 11, we get the mind fuck in Tuan's perspective of I have to feel this way, but I feel another way. And I think we lost that with Sanderson. He stopped going into that where it was now she's like, oh, it's all about the omens and this and da 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 da. Whereas before it was the omens said this, but I don't like that. And I wish we would have continued that further. And we get
Yeah.
a slight moment of that at the very end here, but at the same time, it's still wanting in that
Well,
direction.
the thought I just had was because we were talking about the real Matt wouldn't just blow off all of his obligations no matter how much he doesn't want. But you logistically for the arc of the story, you need him to be back with the Sanshin. Well, here you go. He could this would work better if he came down here to visit Tawan to make sure she's okay for all those personal reasons, but now I've got to get back to the band because they need me and even if I don't want to be, I'm their general. Oh,
Well,
but
and
now I can't
Matt's
because
not Matt's not stupid though. And so what you could have had as a story arc that would have been very believable is I care about her, I want to go see her, but we also need the Shanshan to beat the shadow.
mhm,
You could have had that. It wouldn't have taken away from Matt's free spirit.
no. Well,
No.
here this he's grumbling about wait, I have to teach them. He shouldn't be grumbling. It's well, I mean, yeah, okay. He's gonna grumble about wait, I have to teach the Death Watch guard how to notice and kill a gray man. Well, crap. Okay. I wanted to get back to the band, but if this is what it takes to keep Tawan safe, okay.
Okay, so back to your I wish all three boys would have gotten together. How about all three boys would have gotten together? Matt's back with the band after saving Moiraine. Perrin's getting ready to do his stuff, but he's with the Two Rivers guys. Rand shows up, and Rand just tells Matt, he says, something's new with you. And Matt confesses all after grumbling about it. You could have had stupid banter there. You could have had some grumbling about it and trying to hide that he's the Prince of Ravens and all this stuff. But then it comes out because Rand is in his new Zen mode. He's like, I can see you're not telling me the truth, kind of thing. And then it's like, hey, I'm having trouble with the Shanshan, Matt. I need your help. And then Matt goes down.
You know,
You could have had all of that.
yeah, and the thought just popped in my head because we just talked about that last moment where Rand told him no change of plans. Instead of going to take charge of the armies over here, you're going to take the band and you're going to go get Egwene and Elaine and Nynaeve and take them to Camelin. And it would have been basically the same conversation, but now different because Rand is different. Of
Mhm.
instead of basically
Yeah.
bullying Matt into doing what he wants, it's no, Matt, we need to do this. This needs to get done.
Yeah.
And
My last
you're the one who can
interaction
do
with
it.
your wife was not very good.
Yeah.
So I need your help here, buddy.
Yeah.
And Matt would have grumbled and grumbled and grumbled and then been like, all right, I'll do
And
it.
you have Perrin there in the middle being the peacemaker like he was in the Great Hunt when
Hmm.
Matt just wanted to get away from Rand and easy enough. But instead we had to have a bunch of stupid, not
We
funny
had to have a
funnies.
cartoon. Yeah, we had to
Yeah,
have a
cartoon.
cartoon. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh joy. Well, that's enough old men yelling at the clouds for today, I guess.
Yep. Time for me to make some tacos, I think.
Yep. And then we will, I don't know what we're talking about Wednesday with because everything is awful. So
Oh,
it'll be something
what did
terrible.
I send you?
Uh
I
the
said,
the DNC at the DNC,
oh, and
Planned
yeah,
Parenthood
we're gonna have,
reveals. Yeah.
yeah, so
Mm.
we're gonna talk about the DNC's, I guess stuff. Uh, the one I sent you was Planned Parenthood filled up all appointment slots for abortions and vasectomies at the Democratic National Convention. Oh, joy. But also, we're going to see, I mean, there are a lot of registered protests for that, and it's Chicago. So this could go very badly, especially since we have the I'm gonna put air quotes for the pro-Palestine, which I call the dumb activists, because if you're pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, you're wrong. I'm sorry. Either one of those, because it's a very nuanced thing. You can't have one or the other. But yeah, they're all geared up to do stupid stuff. And Chicago is apparently in a lawsuit right now with their police union for how they handled riots 30 years ago or something like
Oh,
that.
geez.
So they're not willing to do some things that are preventative to bad things. So we've got a lot of that. Yeah, amazing how this is working. The RNC went smoothly, by the way. I'm
Well,
not a
except for that
Republican,
thing that
but
happened
there,
the week before.
yeah, well, yeah, that thing. Yeah,
That should which shall remain nameless.
yeah, well, that's what the media says. But yeah, so we'll see what happens because I don't know. The thing about the that side of the aisle, the left side of the aisle, is they fight so hard. What I like to equate it to is family squabbles, but at the end of the day, family first. So they still all vote the same, no matter what comes out of it,
Mm.
you know. And so we'll see what happens, but it's looking to be very, very, very ugly. I hope it's not, but at the same time, we might have some news. But yeah, the Planned Parenthood thing is big. But also on some positive news, Lizzo has started her fitness kick
Good for
publicly.
you.
Oh no, good. Actually, no, we should celebrate this because it encourages it, right? So yeah, it's like, oh, you were so stupid for a long time, but now you're doing the right thing, and people are like, oh, don't celebrate it because she was the
Hmm.
problem for so long. And it's like, no,
Hmm.
no, no, no. You want to encourage
Hmm.
this, you want to encourage the good thing. So, and she's got a lot of followers. So
It's
if
like complaining about a heroin addict finally going to rehab.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So if her 5 million followers see her do this thing and she loses, 50, 100 pounds or how probably more than that she needs to lose to get to healthy, hey, let's support it. Let's go ahead and use her. My thing about narcissism is if you direct it in the direction of good,
Hmm.
then they're going to be the strongest advocates of that. So keep directing her in that way. Uh, so we'll talk about that a little bit. We do need to talk football because it's almost a season.
Oh,
And I was at the game yesterday. Go Texans! We crushed the Giants, and I'm talking just the first stringers. I'm not talking the rest of the game. So yeah, we're looking to have a good year, hopefully. And we need to look at betting odds. We need to get on the money ball stuff again. So that either this week or the next week, we need to hit that. Uh, anything else you want to put on the
well,
radar?
that's all I got. We'll see y'all next time.
All right, later.